On 9 November 2019 in Yuendumu, Kumanjayi Walker, a 19-year-old Warlpiri-Luritja teenager, was shot and killed by former constable Zachary Rolfe.
It's been 1 year since Kumanjayi Walker's family gathered to hear coroner Elizabeth Armitage share her finding into his death.
Having considered all the evidence, including Mr Rolfe's explanations and justifications, I found that Mr Rolfe was racist and that he worked in and was the beneficiary of an organisation with hallmarks of institutional racism.
In 2022, Rolfe was found not guilty of Kumanjayi Walker's murder, but his family have always maintained that Rolfe's racism played a role in Walker's death. Coroner Elizabeth Armitage said she couldn't rule that out.
That I cannot exclude that possibility is a tragedy for Kumanjayi's family and community, who will always believe that racism played an integral part in his death, and it is a taint that may stain the NT Police.
I'm Daniel James, and you're listening to 7am. Today, we're bringing you an episode recorded just after the inquest with investigative journalist Kate Wild, whose book, The Red House, examines Kumanjayi Walker's death and how the racist culture of Northern Territory Police enabled Zachary Rolfe to act with impunity. It's Sunday, July 5. This episode was originally published in July 2025. Kate, this particular inquest, can you tell me about its scope and about the coroner's approach, the questions that she was seeking to answer?
So the coronial process is designed to determine the place and cause of a person's death and the identity of the person who's died at its most basic. But it's also designed to figure out what has contributed to that death in order to prevent similar deaths in the future. And that was really the task that Elizabeth Armitage set herself, was to look more deeply at this conflict between a young Aboriginal man and a young white police officer in a single house in a remote community in the Northern Territory. What led them both to be in that house at that moment? What were the forces, the cultural and attitudinal forces driving each of them? And what made that a fatal moment of contact? One of the things that has been most impressive about this inquest is the way that Elizabeth Armitage has run her courtroom. It's been one of the most inclusive and informal processes that I've seen. For instance, the coronial opened with a Warlpiri interpreter sitting next to Libby Armitage on the bench and interpreting everything that she said. So from the beginning, Warlpiri language and law and culture were sort of placed at the same level as the most senior Western legal person in the room. And those singular acts of sort of rebellion against the way that things have always been and taking the risk of making a change like that risk being taken by someone in a position of power, I think maybe that's the kind of thing that is going to bring the sorts of change that we all want to see but don't necessarily believe can come just from a single report.
And so why has it taken so long for this report to be handed down?
So the coronial started in September 2022, about 6 months after Rolfe's trial finished and he was acquitted. Almost immediately, Zachary Rolfe's legal team started making objections to the kind of evidence that he should be made to give. So having to give evidence about racism within the Northern Territory Police Force. Rolfe objected to giving evidence about his use of force history, about his record in the military, about text messages that were found on his phone, and about his disciplinary history in the Northern Territory Police. And those legal appeals are far and away the biggest reason for delays for it going from what should have been a few months to almost 3 years.
So let's go to what the coroner found. When Judge Armitage read out her report, she said that having considered all the evidence, including Mr Rolfe's explanations and justifications, that she found that Mr Rolfe was racist.
While it is not possible for me to say with certainty that Mr Rolfe's racist attitudes were operative in his decisions on 9 November or were a contributing cause of Kumanjayi's death, I cannot exclude that possibility.
And she went on to say that racism may have been a contributing cause of Kumanjayi Walker's death insofar as it may have influenced his actions that night. That is something the Walker family have maintained to be the case. How significant is a finding like that from the coroner?
I think it's significant. I don't think to anyone who has been in the Territory or following this inquest closely that it would have been a surprise. It may have been a surprise that the coroner stated it so clearly. I think what was more of a surprise was that Judge Armitage expanded the scope and the influence of racism to the police force more generally as well, to say that, yes, definitely Zachary Rolfe was racist and his attitudes and his beliefs would have influenced his approach to that night and could have been a factor in Kumanjayi Walker's death, but also that some of the responsibility for that lay with the Northern Territory Police Force, which was an organisation that showed the hallmarks of institutional racism, and that because there were senior members within the police force who were responsible for Zachary Rolfe and who were sort of colluding with him in his behaviour and encouraging him in it, he was left immune to any kind of censure. He was sort of encouraged to keep going. No one ever told him that what he was doing was not okay.
In disturbing evidence, on at least 5 occasions, Mr. Rolfe recorded on his phone body-worn footage of his forceful arrests of Aboriginal men. He replayed the body-worn video to colleagues and forwarded the phone footage to family and friends. It is clear that a significant motivation for doing this was because he was proud of, was boasting about, and wished to be celebrated for his physical feats of tactical skill or ability. He thought that using force against arrest targets and causing them serious injury was funny.
And how do you think that the Northern Territory Police Force is grappling with the need to reform itself?
I think that's been one of the most interesting things for me to watch over the sort of now almost 6 years since Kumanjayi Walker's death. It was really evident during Zachary Rolfe's murder trial that there was a sort of internal battle going on within the Northern Territory Police Force for who would rule the culture. And it was a battle between, what are known up here as bush cops and town cops. They're really loose terms, but bush cops, people who work out in remote communities and are much more focused on community policing, which is based on relationships and de-escalation. They still face some really dangerous situations, often in really isolated settings, but it's a much more humanistic approach, I would guess you could say. Whereas the loose term town cops, which really in this instance sort of refers to Zachary Rolfe's style of policing, of sort of cowboy, Rambo, we're the tough guys, we're dominating sort of culture. There's been a battle between those two groups since Kumanjayi Walker's death to see who will gain the upper hand within the Northern Territory Police Force. The coroner certainly in her findings has supported the bush cop culture. The Northern Territory Police Force executive has come out and said that that is definitely the kind of culture that they want to promote and that they want to be known for as Northern Territory police officers. But they have a real fight on their hands because that's not how all frontline police officers want to police.
After the break, the change Kumanjayi Walker's family is calling for.
Today's not a really happy day for us. It's another sad day.
So, Kate, when Zachary Rolfe was acquitted of Kumanjayi Walker's murder, his grandfather, Ned Japajin Hargraves, called for a ban on all guns in Aboriginal communities.
No guns! No guns! In the remote community. We don't want no guns! Enough is enough!
There are several other calls that have come from the Yuendumu community. They want an independent police ombudsman, self-determination, investment in alternatives to prison. What hope do you think the family has now that this inquest has finished and the report has been handed down? Will it get them closer to any of those outcomes?
I mean, one of the strongest findings that the coroner made was that the Northern Territory Police should work with the Yuendumu leadership to work out the circumstances in which police don't carry guns in community.
I've recommended that the NT Police engage directly with the Yuendumu leadership groups to develop mutual respect agreements, including when it would be appropriate for police not to carry firearms in community, and I've made other recommendations concerning the use of long-arm weapons.
So certainly they've been supported by the coroner in that desire for sort of more self-determination, no guns in remote communities.
I've made recommendations on recruit training and cultural inductions. Specifically, I have recommended that the circumstances of Kumanjayi's death be incorporated in training on officer-induced jeopardy. To NT Health, in an effort to both prevent and address trauma experienced by young people like Kumanjayi, I have recommended a strengthening of its developmental screening programs for children under 5 years. To strengthen relationships and the cultural competency of clinics, I have recommended that work be done with the local health advisory groups and other community groups. And I have recommended a strategy be developed for the delivery of sustainable mental health services in Central Australia, including in Yuendumu.
But I guess the community is at the mercy of powers greater than them, government's willingness to support change, to fund change. I think there's a level of cynicism and resignation that all of this paperwork and all of this talking happens and then that's the end of it. So I think a lot of people don't have a lot of expectations, but I think there's reason to have hope that at least a position like the coroner's is very much in support of what the community has asked for. I think there's an extra layer of grief at the moment because there's been another death in custody of a young Warlpiri man quite recently, and that sort of on its own has opened up a lot of old wounds. But sitting listening to the coroner read out some of her recommendations and findings yesterday, in which she also went back through quite a few of the details of Kumanjayi's actual death, I think those wounds were really reopened again in a very visceral sort of way.
To Kumanjayi's family and to the community of Yuendumu, I am sorry for your profound loss. I now hand down my findings.
There was no reaction from people when the coroner finished speaking at the end of about 45 minutes of the presentation, and people just sort of melted away reasonably quickly, and the space was left kind of empty.
It's been almost 30 years since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, and we've known so much about these issues for decades, Kate, and governments have really sat on recommendations to fix this, but it's been a long, long time and it keeps happening. So do you believe that there'll be a case or a report that finally makes governments act?
No, I don't. I don't think reports, I think they're worthwhile. I think what the coroner has produced is a slab of history and a story that bears witness to one of the latest chapters in the Northern Territory's history of relationships between First Nations people and the police. But, there are supermarket trolleys full of reports all over the country into things like this, and none of them have managed to make the changes that are necessary. I don't know what will make that change other than continued pressure from the broader community on the political system. It feels like a really lame answer, but I don't know that anyone has the answer to what will make the change happen. Otherwise, we'd be doing it.
And in terms of that idea of the community placing pressure on government to act, what toll does that take on a family to have to do that over years and years?
Enormous. It's an enormous toll. But that's a toll that First Nations people around the country, and I would say in my experience, particularly in remote communities, carry every day. The lives of people in Yuendumu are political every single day. And so they are constantly carrying that weight, that their lives are controlled, hemmed in by laws and regulations and decisions that they don't have any part in and they don't have any power over. And so fighting against that is a part of daily life for people in remote communities, and it takes an enormous toll.
Kate, thank you for talking to me today.
It's a pleasure.
Seven AM will be back tomorrow with special guest Bernard Fanning. He's hitting out at the federal government over a rumoured dirty deal with AI companies that would see them given access to music like his.
There is something that Australian music has brought to, especially contemporary music in the last 60 years, that is really unique. It's really unique, and that should be preserved. And this idea that our music can be traded as an economic token, or our ideas are somehow able to be, our property is able to be traded away, is ludicrous.
I'm Daniel James. Thanks for listening.